They never saw it coming. The quietest person in that room, the one who barely spoke, who never once raised their voice, walked out with everything: the deal, the respect, the room itself. And the loudest person, still talking, still performing, still wondering why the energy shifted without warning. This is not luck. This is not charisma. This is a pattern so consistent, so psychologically precise, that once you recognize it, you will never be fooled by noise again. Most people have been conditioned to mistake volume for authority, to confuse energy with strength, to believe the person commanding the most attention commands the most power. That belief is the trap, and the truly powerful built it specifically for people who never learned to be still. While the loud ones perform, the quiet ones calculate. While the talkers chase attention, the watchers collect information. Every hesitation, every unguarded moment, every crack that loud people create by never knowing when to stop. Machiavelli understood this. The wise man does not reveal his mind freely, because the moment you show everything, you hand others the map to your undoing. True power does not announce itself. It does not need the room to notice it. It simply moves, quietly, precisely. And that stillness, that deliberate, unreadable calm, is what makes people instinctively uneasy around those who carry it. But silence alone is not the weapon. What you do with it, that's where everything changes. Watch what happens the next time someone goes quiet on you. Really quiet. No response, no reaction, just stillness. And within minutes, you will feel the urge to fill it, to explain, to soften, to fix something that was never broken. That urge is not kindness, that's conditioning, and somewhere along the line, someone learned to use it against you. Here's what plays out in the workplace every single day. A manager says nothing after your proposal, no approval, no critique, just silence. And within seconds, you're already backtracking, qualifying, shrinking, not because your idea was wrong, because silence created pressure you weren't trained to hold. This is the rule nobody writes down. The one who speaks first after tension surrenders first. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is pressure, invisible, weightless, and absolutely suffocating to anyone with something to hide. The negotiator knows this, not the motivational kind, the cold, strategic kind, the one who makes an offer, then stops completely and waits, because every second of silence that follows is a second the other side spends talking themselves into a worse deal. Stop explaining yourself to people who are only listening to find gaps. Stop defending your worth to rooms that were never qualified to measure it. The moment your silence offers them nothing to work with, the dynamic inverts. You are no longer reacting. You are controlling. And when you finally do speak, what comes out carries a weight that no amount of constant talking ever could. But only if you understand the next rule, because words are not just communication, they're currency, and most people are hemorrhaging them without realizing it. Think about the last time someone used your own words against you. Not a stranger, someone close, someone you trusted in a moment of openness. You said something real, a frustration, a fear, a doubt you had about yourself. It felt safe at the time. It didn't stay safe, because it was stored quietly. And when the dynamic shifted, when their interest changed or competition entered the scene, what you gave freely became leverage, deployed at exactly the moment it would do the most damage. Here's the rule. Every word you speak is data, every sentence a file, every unguarded moment collected, cataloged, available. Not always by enemies. That's what makes it dangerous. The person who smiled the widest, who listened the most carefully, whom you never once suspected until the moment you became inconvenient. Machiavelli didn't warn about enemies, he warned about availability. People use whatever exists when it serves them, and nothing is more available than what you freely handed over. The most strategically aware people in any room are never the most talkative. They listen more than they speak. They ask more than they answer. And what they do reveal is curated, deliberate, just enough to appear open, and nothing more. Here's the twist most people never see coming. The ones holding your words against you are not always doing it consciously. Information spreads, contexts collapse, a friend becomes a competitor, a colleague becomes a rival, and what you said in confidence 6 months ago is now currency in a room you were never invited to. Oversharing is not connection, it's self-destruction dressed up as vulnerability. Guard your words, not because people are evil, but because information always outlives the moment you created it. And knowing what not to say is only part of the equation, because the real advantage belongs to the one who knows to watch while everyone else is busy being watched. Every room you walk into is a stage, but the most dangerous person in that room is never performing. They're directing. While others manage impressions, the observer manages information, and information held quietly is the only currency that never loses value. Watch what happens in any corporate meeting. The people who speak the most reveal the most. Every word is a window, every hand gesture a confession, every defensiveness around a question nobody made threatening a signal. They're so focused on how they're landing, they've completely forgotten to notice who is watching. That person in the corner, still, unhurried, asking one precise question and then going quiet again. They're not disengaged, they're operating. Here's the rule: when you perform, you reveal. When you observe, you accumulate. The gap between what you reveal and what you accumulate is the exact measurement of your strategic position. This is deeper than silence. The true observer reads what people never intended to show. The nervous laugh that arrives 3 beats too late, the sudden warmth from someone who was cold last week and what they need from you now, the micro-expression that contradicts the sentence still being finished. Here's the psychological truth that most people never register. Attention-seeking narrows perception. When someone is performing for the room, they lose the ability to monitor their own signals. They're watching your reaction so carefully they stop watching themselves. And in that blind spot, everything is visible. The performer reveals their architecture, the observer memorizes it. You don't need to be the smartest in the room. You don't need to be the loudest. You need to be the most still, because stillness is not passivity, it's predatory patience. And once you understand what to look for, every room becomes readable, every person a pattern. But what do you do with that pattern? That's where the power dynamic shifts permanently.
Something unusual happens when you stop reacting. Not subtle, not gradual, immediate. The moment you remove your reaction, they don't go quiet, they accelerate. Words start spilling out that nobody asked for, justifications for things you never questioned, explanations for positions you never challenged. They're no longer responding to you, they're responding to the silence, and the silence is dismantling them. This is not coincidence. Guilt cannot exist in a vacuum. It needs a reaction to feel validated. Aggression needs friction to feel powerful. Remove both, and the entire internal structure collapses inward. They're pushing against themselves now, and you're doing nothing at all. Think about the last time you watched this happen in a social setting. Someone makes a sharp comment in a group. Everyone waits for the target to react. The target says nothing, just holds still. And within 30 seconds, the aggressor is explaining themselves to a room that never asked for it. Suddenly, they're the uncomfortable one. Suddenly, they're the exposed one. Your stillness became a mirror, and what it reflected back, they couldn't stand to face. Machiavelli understood that the most effective form of control is never force, it's positioning. Place yourself where the other person's behavior works against them and simply wait. The architecture collapses without you lifting a hand. The most psychologically formidable people are never the most reactive. They're the most still. Not because they feel nothing, but because they've built something between the provocation and the response, a gap, a pause.
Emotional reactivity is not passion, it is exposure. And stillness, deliberate, unreadable stillness, is the most suffocating pressure you can apply without making a single move. But what happens when you take this inside, when the stillness is not just external, but runs all the way down? That is where it stops being a tactic and starts being something else entirely. You have seen this person. Maybe you did not understand them at the time. They sit through an entire board meeting and say nothing, not because they have nothing to offer, because they understand something about words that most people never learn, that frequency destroys value, and scarcity creates it. They speak twice in 2 hours, maybe 3 times, and when they do, something shifts mid-sentence. Conversations stop, people turn, the energy in the room reorganizes without anyone being able to explain why. That is not charisma, that is scarcity. And scarcity is the oldest law of influence ever identified. Words obey the same economics as everything else. Flood the supply, the price collapses. The person who speaks constantly has already destroyed the value of their own voice. Every additional sentence is a withdrawal from an account they are not refilling. The person who speaks rarely has created a psychological premium around their words before they even open their mouth. But here's what nobody talks about. It's not just how rarely they speak, it's when. The strategic gap, the pause held 1 beat longer than comfortable, that specific moment of silence before the sentence where the room leans in slightly without realizing it. That anticipation is manufactured, deliberately, and it belongs entirely to the person willing to hold the silence long enough. Watch this play out in a negotiation. One party stops volunteering words completely. The other side starts filling the space, offering more, justifying earlier, conceding faster. Not because the terms changed, because silence created pressure, and pressure always needs somewhere to go. Every unnecessary word you cut makes the remaining ones sharper. Every silence you hold makes the moment you break it matter. But there's a layer beyond this, because speaking less doesn't just change how people hear you in the room, it changes what they say about you when you leave it. And that, the reputation that builds itself in your absence, is a different kind of power altogether. Watch what happens to people who constantly announce themselves. They tell you what they have achieved. They remind you what they are capable of. They manage their image so aggressively, so visibly, that something begins happening in the minds of everyone observing them. Not admiration, calculation. Because when someone works that hard to control perception, people instinctively start wondering what exists behind it that requires that much management. The loudest self-promoter is never the most powerful person in the room. They are the most insecure, and at some level, everyone already senses it. But a reputation built without announcement, that is a different architecture entirely. It doesn't need your presence to survive. It persists when you leave, untouched, untouchable. And precisely because it cannot be fully explained, it cannot be fully dismissed. Here's the rule. The person who needs to explain their power has already diminished it. The person whose power explains itself never has to say a word. Show results. Remain unreadable. Let the room fill your silence with its own speculation, because what people construct about you in your absence is always more powerful than anything you could have announced yourself. And few ever realize this kind of reputation exists until it is far too late to compete with it. No amount of external silence matters if the inside is chaos. No stillness survives internal panic. No reputation holds when anxiety is running the deeper program. Every strategy discussed until now, the observation, the restraint, the mystery, the scarcity of words, it all collapses the moment you lose control of what's happening inside. This is where most people stop. They master the exterior. They learn when to speak and when to stay silent. They build the reputation, the posture, the calm surface. And then someone says the wrong thing in the wrong room, and everything unravels. Not because the strategy was flawed, because the foundation was never built. The silence of the mind, the real power no one teaches. You can hold still on the outside while completely unraveling inside, and people feel it, not consciously, instinctively. Internal chaos has a frequency. The slight tension in how a sentence ends, the micro hesitation before an answer, the energy that contradicts posture. People around you are always receiving these signals, whether you realize you're broadcasting them or not. Here's what separates the truly untouchable. They have built something between the trigger and the response. Not suppression, a space, a pause that exists entirely within, where the trigger arrives, and instead of reacting, they observe it coldly, curiously, as if watching someone else's emotion from a distance. That is not suppression, that is mastery. When you no longer need approval to feel certain, something shifts. When the room's validation stops being the measure of your worth, it shifts again. When being misunderstood stops feeling like a threat, the final shift happens. A mind that cannot be destabilized, a presence that cannot be manipulated, a self that requires nothing from the outside to remain completely intact. People sense it. They cannot name it, but they feel that something about you does not bend, does not scramble, does not shrink when the temperature drops. Real power begins the moment the world cannot touch you. And the most unsettling part for everyone watching is that they will never fully understand why. If this reached something in you, like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who is still searching for what you just found. Some knowledge is too important to keep to yourself.